Hi, my name is Jeff Hayward, President and CEO of the Heart of Florida United Way. And I want to thank you for tuning in to what I feel is a very important and relevant conversation for our community. In this conversation, we'll be going behind the headlines with Jay Mobley from Orange County Legal Aid Society to discuss the process of evictions and what is to be expected after the federal eviction moratorium expires on December 31st, 2020. Before we dive in, let me give you some context. We've all witnessed the economic consequences of COVID-19 as it's ravaged our local economy. Businesses have folded, employees have lost their jobs, hours have been cut, and consequently, families are obviously not able to afford their rent and mortgages without a paycheck. Affordable housing has been an issue in Central Florida for a long time, and the ability to stay in housing that families can afford is what's in jeopardy here. And no one knows this very better than ALICE. ALICE is an acronym, and it stands for Asset Limited, Income Constrained, Employed. Before the pandemic, ALICE made up about 350,000 households in our community. These households were living paycheck to paycheck in danger of falling off the dangerous financial cliff. Now, this equates to about 50% of the Central Florida families who were unable to make ends meet before COVID-19 wrecked our economy. And now we're seeing families struggling even more as the E, Floyd, in ALICE hangs by a thread. We hear the fear and panic in their voices when they call our 211 Information and Referral Crisis Line. The 211 Information Referral Crisis Line is a resource that connects individuals with existing community resources. Anyone can call, text, or chat with a 211 call specialist 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year to see what assistance might be available to them in their situation. We specifically began tracking calls about evictions on June 17th of this year. Since then, Heart of Florida United Way has received 14,250 calls for eviction assistance in Orange, Seminole, and Osceola counties. Additionally, we've watched the weekly total creep up week over week. In fact, last week's calls totaled nearly 6,000. Between all of this, plus the pre-existing economic fragility faced by our ALICE families, it's obvious that stable housing and assistance is a vital need, which is why we're here. 7 months ago, the CDC issued a federal eviction moratorium that prevented landlords from evicting many tenants impacted by COVID-19 for non-payment. On December 31st of this year, that moratorium expires. To speak with us today about what that means for Central Florida is Jay Mobley, Senior Housing Consumer Attorney with Legal Aid Society of the Orange County Bar Association. Jay Mobley has worked as a housing and consumer attorney with the Legal Aid Society for the past 7 years, where he manages the Legal Aid Society's Homeless Advocacy and Outreach Project, which provides on-site legal clinics for our homeless population here in Central Florida. He serves on the executive board of Heart of Florida Mission United. He's also chair of Mission United's legal committee. So Jay, welcome. We're glad you're here.
Thanks, Jeff. Glad to be here with you.
So Jay, let's start with the basics. What is the process of an eviction here in Florida?
Florida is a judicial eviction state. That means that you can't be evicted without a court order. Your landlord just can't show up one day and say, I want you out by tomorrow, and you have to leave. They actually have to file an eviction complaint, take you to court, and get the judge to sign off on it and approve it. The first step specific to these non-payment of rent issues, which is what we're seeing the most of right now, they would give you a 3-day notice to pay or vacate. If you pay within the 3 days, it all gets remedied. That's a great scenario. Most of the time, tenants aren't able to vacate in the 3 days. So on the 4th day, the landlord, what we call, accrues the right to go file that eviction action. So they go down to the courthouse, they file the complaint for eviction. The sheriff will bring it out to you, serve you personally, or it may be a private process server. But once you're served, you have to take certain steps to prevent things from speeding up dramatically and you being evicted regardless of whatever protection you could claim. You have to answer in writing to the court, tell them why you think you shouldn't be evicted. And you also have to pay, under Florida statutes, all of the rent money that is alleged owed into the court registry within the same 5 days. Now, that's a big hurdle for anyone in the best of times, and we struggle with it before COVID. But now, pretty much nobody's going to be able to pay within 5 days. That is, the next step would be default. If you don't meet those two terms, you can be defaulted. A default means that the judge can go ahead and enter a final judgment for eviction, and could go ahead normally and issue a 24-hour writ, which is the 24-hour notice a sheriff would bring to your door, and the landlord can have them back out 24 hours later to enforce the eviction or physically remove the tenants and put their personal belongings, excuse me, on the street. Now, if you are able to claim the CDC declaration protections, you have to get a copy of the CDC declaration, read through it, make sure it all applies to you, because you are swearing under oath that these conditions and these terms apply in your individual situation. If they all do, you sign it, give it to your landlord, and you need to file that along with your answer. You can go ahead and do the CDC declaration now, even if you don't have an eviction. If it applies to you, go ahead and do it, and then file a copy of it with an eviction answer if you're served that eviction. Right now, what it's doing is preventing that last step or the physical removal of a tenant until after it expires December 31st. Doesn't mean your case won't go ahead to default and final judgment, meaning that you've been evicted legally. You just can't be physically removed. There are a couple ways a landlord can challenge it. He can ask the judge to call a hearing and test the veracity of each and every element. So folks should be ready to testify as to it applying to them. But otherwise, what we're seeing is that for the most part, it stays the actual eviction till January 1st or later.
So Jay, where would someone get a copy of the CDC declaration?
You can, it is probably one of the top Googled things. You can Google it, go to the CDC's website. They have it there. You can contact legal aid. We can give you a copy of it. We can also advise you of your rights in your individual situation.
Right. Jay, what happens to someone who is now behind on their rent and they're being evicted if this moratorium expires on the 31st?
I don't think it's going to be a real pretty picture. Any stay on the cases that are currently filed would be lifted. That protection goes away and the wheels start moving as if we don't have a CDC or any moratorium. That means that if you're lucky enough to have had your physical removal stopped, that is lifted and you would get a 24-hour notice from the sheriff and you would be removed. I think we're going to see a lot of new cases filed. We have landlords who are waiting this out, and we've already seen that they have told tenants, we're just going to wait until after it expires and then file the eviction. So we're going to get a rash of new cases. Those cases won't have any protections. So if you can't pay that rent within 5 days, it literally happens like on the 6th day, the judge could sign it. 7th day, the sheriff is out at your door. And then on the 9th day, they could come back. So it could happen in 10 days where it's filed, you answer, you don't pay, you get defaulted, you get evicted. So we're going to see, a lot more 24 hours notices served. And I think a lot of folks are going to be either having to move in with family, friends, or we've had some tell us they're going to have to live in their cars or go to shelters.
What type of backlog is this going to cause, Jay, in the courts?
The backlog is a double-edged sword. It may actually help tenants because it would slow things down. The sheriff only has so many folks dedicated to writs, but there's nothing preventing them from adding more to speed up the process. We're hoping that they don't get all dumped at one time. I think maybe the best we can hope for is that things, because of the backlog, do get bogged down a bit and it stretches out the timeline.
So Jay, considering you serve on the Heart of Florida United Way's Mission United Advisory Council, which for our listeners is a United Way program which serves veterans in our community, it'd be great if you could provide us from your unique perspective on how veterans have been impacted at this intersection of the pandemic and evictions.
Sure.
Can you speak to that briefly?
Sure. Veterans, they are definitely not immune to this crisis in any way. We generally see veterans averaging the same type of requests as everyone else. We have seen increased requests for veterans in areas of not only evictions, but family law and DV issues. I'm sure you can imagine what the stress of an eviction, not being able to pay bills, and the potential homelessness does to someone with PTSD. It only aggravates the situation. So we have definitely seen an increase in veterans affected by the crisis. Um, we're folding them right into the care we give everyone else, but a lot of times they need additional wraparound services, and that can be challenging with limited resources.
So Jay, assuming a family moves forward and faces an eviction and it's executed upon, can you speak to what the fallout is? How does that follow them through? What's the impact on their family? What are the consequences of that, having that on your record?
Yeah, it's really like a double whammy. I mean, you get evicted and you think, okay, that crisis is over, but then you have an eviction on your record. Florida considers that a public record. It can't be sealed or expunged. It's going to follow you around. It's going to make getting another rental property harder because it's going to show up on background checks. Um, if you have rent that wasn't paid to your old landlord, that can be reported to credit agencies. They can even sue you later on for the debt. It especially causes problems when we have debt collections and you're flagged in a rental bureau, like a credit reporting bureau, as a non-paying tenant. It will cause problems getting a new place.
And how long does that follow you?
The eviction never goes away. So what you're really looking at is how long back, how far a period back does the new rental place check? If they check 1 year, 3 years, your record is going to stay the same. So it just depends on how far of a look back that they go.
So let me get this straight. So if I'm a property owner and I get foreclosed on, or I file bankruptcy, that eventually gets eliminated from my credit history after, from what I understand, about 7 years.
Right.
Eviction, a tenant, it stays with them forever.
It does in the state of Florida. It's part of our public records law. They consider that eviction filing, the filing of that case, as a public record. So it is very, near to impossible. The only way that you could perhaps seal, the only time you have a chance, is during the eviction action. If you're able to reach some agreement with the landlord that they agree to let you seal the record in return for 9 times out of 10 payment of that debt. So unfortunately, folks aren't going to be able to negotiate very much if they can't pay the rent.
So Jay, with a couple of new dates coming up, January 1st, certainly the eviction moratorium will be lifted on December 31st. Congress may act on a new stimulus package, and we have a new administration coming in January. What's your biggest fear or your biggest hope, given all of those dates coming up?
I'd have to say my biggest fear is that the courts and the sheriff move quickly after January 1st, and we see, mass evictions because the writs are being served and the cases are moving under Florida law much, much faster than they've been. That would probably be worst case scenario. We see a lot of people being put out in a short time frame. As far as the new administration, I'm not sure what to expect, but it may very well be late for too many folks if they're evicted between the 1st and the 21st. So any action that Congress does in the meantime might help. If we get an extension to the CDC order through January 31st, that would help. I haven't heard that we're getting that, but that would be great news. As far as what could be done, I think some type of reasonable extension to the protection the CDC order offered for folks who really cannot pay the rent and were COVID impacted. We would hope for some kind of extension like that, or something better.
So I know you don't have a crystal ball, but with cases again rising, deaths rising, and a lot of talk, at least around other parts of the country, of shutting down parts of the economy, what are you hopeful that actually would extend the moratorium a little bit, or will it get even worse because there will be no protection in spite of the economic challenges?
It really depends on, what the current administration does to extend. I do wish I had that crystal ball. If they don't extend, I think it's going to be really bad. If they do extend it, the pressure is still going to be there on landlords. I understand this, there's two sides to every story, and landlords are certainly under pressure here as well. But I think some type of reasonable extension, has to happen, or we're going to see mass evictions.
Well, at Heart of Florida United Way's 211 information referral crisis line, since March, we've been experienced an unprecedented surge of calls for assistance. In fact, at one point, our call volume was 4 times the usual call volume. We were about 700 calls a day. At one point, we hit 3,200. We've leveled out, but we still remain consistent at about double what we were last year. My point is that the social service sector is experiencing an unprecedented increase in demand for services. How has your organization been impacted over these past 9 months?
We have been all but overwhelmed with requests for assistance. I was looking at the numbers just before we talked, and we have had a 400% increase in just eviction requests alone, just for eviction assistance. That's not counting the increased family law cases because of all the DV issues from COVID, but evictions, 400%. Now, we've taken a lot of steps to ramp up our capacity. When we went into this, we had 2 dedicated housing attorneys at Legal Aid. We have trained all of our staff attorneys, that's 16 more attorneys, who are able to do basic consultant advice for evictions, assistance with forms prep, answer prep, all that. So that's an additional 16. Keep in mind, they're doing this above and beyond their normal workload. And some of these attorneys are, guardian ad litem attorneys who work with abused kids, but they're doing evictions on top of that. We also trained up around 35 to 40 volunteer attorneys, and we're running a housing clinic, pro bono housing clinic on Tuesdays and Thursdays. We've been doing that for months now, and we plan to do it on into at least the first 3 months probably of the new year. That's allowed us to expand quite a bit. We recently hired a part-time housing attorney to take some of the brunt of it. And we've done, all we can to be ready. And we are treading water, we're kind of up to our noses, but we're serving everyone. But if we get an anticipated rush in January, we are definitely going to be, paddling upstream.
So my concern, what actually sent shivers up my spine, Jay, when you said you're already at 400% increase, you've had to take all the additional 16 attorneys, you've trained all those volunteer attorneys, and this is while the moratorium's in place.
Yes.
What are you bracing yourselves for, and how will you handle what I would assume, from a layman's standpoint, the deluge of calls you're going to get if this moratorium is lifted completely?
We are working with other agencies in town. We're constantly seeking new volunteer attorneys, anyone who can help out and join our pro bono project. We're divvying up work internally so that we can dedicate more time. But quite frankly, this is an issue of lack of resources. At some point, we will be overwhelmed and we may have to turn someone away. We're going to do everything we can to prevent that, but it's eventually going to be a numbers game.
So Jay, I know the legal process, I mean, it is a process, it has to follow through, and there is court procedures that you must follow with timelines and so forth. But I've got to say, I was pleasantly surprised in the beginning when we started getting involved and talking to you around evictions, just how collaborative the whole court system is between the Chief Justice and his team of judges and the clerk of courts, and yourself and your team. And I know that some of the landlords, the associations were at the table. Is that usual for that level of collaboration, or is it?
I think we're pretty lucky here in our area, our circuit, because we have that type of atmosphere. I know it's not the same in all circuits. We've had different interpretations of the CDC order in different counties and different jurisdictions. So I think we're really lucky here with the people we have. I think we've done outstanding for, what we've been faced with. We've never seen this before. We've done things like have eviction hearings virtually now. We're doing as much as we can to do business as normal in completely abnormal situations. But I think we're ahead of the game compared to a lot of others.
So Jay, where can someone go or where can they seek help if they are facing eviction?
They can call us. We are all working remotely, but we're at well over 100% capacity right now, operational. Our main number, 407-841-8310. They call that. We have a person answering the phone. Just ask our receptionist for an eviction consult. Tell her you need to speak to someone about a housing matter. We will get you in the queue to speak with one of our attorneys, be they volunteer or staff, and we will get to you and help you.
Thank you. And for those listening, as Jay said, resources are tight. They're very limited, but you can also call 211 or go on HFUW.org/get help. And we will also do our best to connect you to the resources out there. So Jay, thank you so much for what you and the Orange County Legal Aid Society has done for our community. We've gotten to know each other over the last few months. Certainly, I wish it was under better circumstances, but you have been a tremendous resource, a critical lifeline for so many in this community who find themselves in a very disparate situation. Appreciate you sharing your knowledge with us and hope we can get past this together in 2021.
Thank you. I enjoy helping people, and I've definitely been able to help a lot of folks this year.
I'm sure you have. Well, I know when you put your head in the pillow at night, there's a lot of stress and those you can't help, but you've done a great job and we just want to thank you.
Thank you. I couldn't have done it without my team at Legal Aid.
And to our audience, thank you for taking the time to learn and go behind the headlines with me. Heart of Florida United Way is dedicated to being the voice and advocate for families in Central Florida who are simply trying to achieve their full potential and lead stable lives. For more information about the work of Heart of Florida United Way, visit us at hfuw.org. Until then, thank you, be well, and live united.